Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Welcome. It's such a beautiful summer day, and it's a great topic for this summer day. Before I turn things over to Anthony Sammarco, who we're so happy to have back today, I just want to thank Care One at Sharon for the treats today. They're always so good to us, and we appreciate them. Thank you. Thanks. All right, so Anthony Sammarco, author, historian. He's going to bring back some Boston nostalgia and talk about Revere Beach Wonderland. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm not sure if you came to hear about Revere Beach or the air conditioning and cookies, but I'll try to compete. It's a beautiful day. I worked in my garden for about 2 hours this morning, and by the time I got inside, I basically had to be wrung out. I can't believe the humidity lately. But anyway, it's lovely in here. How many people had ever gone to Revere Beach? You know, I think everyone at one time or another. It was not just the beach, but it was also the amusements. So it was something in some ways that was a real special treat. But Revere Beach is something that also included what was called Revere Beach Wonderland. And now you might remember the dog racing at Wonderland. That was an area that was amusements beginning at the turn of the 20th century. And because it was just a couple of miles from the railroad station, and it was the narrow gauge railroad, not the blue line, it was a little bit too far, and it failed. And what they did was to move the amusements to the boulevard. So the amusements would go up and down the boulevard facing the ocean. It was honky-tonk, but it was a lot of fun. Well, seen here on the cover, which is Wonderland, this was the entrance, you began to realize that Revere Beach was developed by the period of 1895. Now, the ocean had been there since immemorial, but the whole concept was Revere Beach is considered the people's beach. Revere Beach attracted people from all over the state, including families, vacationers, and people from all walks of life. Revere Beach is perfectly located close to Boston and surrounding cities, and conveniently on major roads leading in and out of the city. On October 1st of 1896, the Metropolitan Park assumed control over the beach and began to develop it for bathing facilities, as well as an amusement strip facing the ocean. Now, I'm sure in the 17th and 18th century, our Puritan ancestors weren't bathing or even sunning on the beach. But by the latter part of the 19th century, this was becoming quite the fad. Now, Charles Eliot, seen here in his photograph, was born in Cambridge, Massachusetts. He graduated from Harvard University and trained under the supervision of Frederick Law Olmsted, whose works included New York's Central Park and the grounds of the United States Capitol in Washington, D.C. Eliot stated in November of 1896, quote, "We must not conceal from the visitors the long sweep of the open beach, which is the finest thing about the reservation," unquote. Charles Eliot designed a broad boulevard on the old railroad bed, and on the beach side he placed a series of simple but elegant pavilions and a bandstand. A parking pavilion could accommodate 1,000 bicycles, not automobiles, and tunnels led from the beach under the boulevard to an elaborate bathhouse with changing rooms for 1,000 bathers. The Metropolitan Park Commission had a monopoly on bathing suits at Revere Beach. Bathers were required to rent their suits at the bathhouse, and the reservation manufactured, repaired, and laundered them as well. The on-site laundry could wash, wring, and press 500 bathing suits an hour. Well, it was something to do. But here on a postcard of Revere Beach in 1890, yes, this was open land, beautiful, but you saw people going fully dressed. Many people would go with a hat or even an umbrella or a parasol. The sun was intense. But in this postcard, you see people wading in the water as well as walking along the beach. Even then, they didn't actually disclaim it wasn't for just people. Horse and carriages actually would come, and even dogs. Well, during that period of time, it was accessible because of the railroad. Now, the Boston, Revere Beach, and Lynn Railroad was the largest single factor in the development and growth of Revere as a town. popularly known as the narrow gauge railroad that operated from Lynn to East Boston. Prior to 1896, its roadbed followed a path that traced the crescent shape of the coastline, and the train operated along Railroad Avenue, which is today named Revere Beach Boulevard. And it was then removed and relocated 400 yards to the west, towards what is today Wonderland Track. The MBTA currently runs its blue line along the same roadbed, and in its heyday, passengers patronized the train from stations all along the resort area. Point of Pines, Oak Island, Revere Beach, and Bathhouse were just a few. Now, the railroad was actually to connect East Boston with Lynn. There was employment, and you are not old enough to remember, but Lynn was a huge shoe manufacturing, and a lot of people would take not just the penny ferry from the north end to East Boston, but then the narrow gauge railroad to Lynn. So one of the stops was Revere Beach, and this became a major part of the development of not just the beach, but the amusements as well. Now, this is a postcard. You can see the train. The train was 4 cars. People commuted to Boston as well. And this was a major part of what we saw as the changing of Revere from what was basically a small village on the ocean into a major town with about 25,000 people by 1900. Well, Revere Beach Reservation, now a National Historic Landmark, was the first ocean beach in the United States, and it was acquired for the purpose of public recreation and one of the first properties added to the Metropolitan Park system. In 1895, the time of its acquisition, Revere Beach was a seaside resort and becoming overdeveloped. On the left-hand side, this is a wonderful photograph. There were shelters all along the beach. Now, you can see the people in the foreground are fully dressed. Not only is the ocean bracing, but saltwater air is thought good for the body. But you began to realize during the period of 1895 right through to 1905, this was something that was subtly changing. Now again, here is the pavilion. You see people not only walking along the steps that lead down to the sand of the beach, but they're fully dressed. But the people sit on the sand. Some have umbrellas. They're not parasols. But it's a great idea to realize it was subtly changing from what was a place of a promenade into a bathing facility. Now, the shelters themselves were designed by Ernest Wadsworth Longfellow. You probably don't know the name. His cousin was Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, the poet. But he was an architect who had designed the stations for the elevated railway. You might remember Sullivan Station in Charlestown. It went all the way to Dudley Street and later to Forest Hills. He was a very adept architect, and he designed these in such a way that not only were they attractive, but they actually stopped the blaring sun. And people began to see in some ways it wasn't just a place that you could actually sit and rest and watch the ocean. They also had the bathhouses. Now, the bathhouse was an important feature. This actually truly had a Turkish bath. I don't know why you needed a Turkish bath if across the street you had the ocean. But the Turkish baths were segregated, male and female, but it was also here that you would begin to rent your bathing suit. You could come with your own bathing suit, but you'd have to actually buy it. They weren't selling them. And they covered from the neck all the way to the knee. So it was both for men who could not be bare-chested as well as for women. Well, in 1895, the Massachusetts legislature ordered the taking of nearly 3 miles of private seacoast land of what is now the Revere Beach Reservation on the left-hand side. The Metropolitan Park Commission was entrusted with the land in 1896, and Charles Elliott, a little-known landscape designer, was chosen by the Park Commission to design Revere Beach Reservation for the best use of the public. Elliott was a part of Olmsted, and Elliott, the successor firm to Frederick Law Olmsted. But he was also the son of Charles Elliott, who was the president of Harvard University. He was a very wealthy man in his own right. And he created what we know of as the Metropolitan Parks that surround the city. So if you know the Middlesex Fells in Medford and Winchester, and you know the Blue Hills Reservation in Milton and Canton, this was his envisionment. Seen here with the buildings that still survived from the 1870s and 1880s, they began to infill with new structures. Now, there were a lot of bathing areas, but it was also the fact that they had boarding houses. And sometimes you could stay a couple of days, you could stay a week, or even the whole summer. And these buildings themselves would be slowly replaced by something that was more up to date. Now, this is a great example. The buildings on the left-hand side were hotels. And of course, many times you had your board. So you had breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But in this instance, this was a major attraction, and it was beginning to attract people of all walks of life. And the whole aspect is, you can see children here walking, a man sitting on a beach, but if you look in the distance on the right-hand side, you see people bathing. Now, this transformed the area. From 1900 to 1988, Revere Beach was well known for its fine dance pavilions. These included the Ocean Pier Ballroom, the Beechcroft, Nautical Gardens, the Frolic, Wonderland, and the Ocean View Ballroom. Did anybody ever go dancing at Revere Beach? I did. And the whole idea was that many people also remember the Crescent Gardens Ballroom, Spanish Gables, and the Moorish Castle. Among the famous bands and musicians that performed for dancing were Paul Whitman, Tommy and Jimmy Dorsey, Guy Lombardo, Louis Prima, and others. And during the 1930s, dance marathons were held at Revere Beach. Macaulay, Revere Beach Chips, 1979. Couples would dance for 45 minutes of every hour from June until October until the end of the contest, when people fell down. It was not uncommon to see people dancing for more than 1,800 hours, and prizes would be awarded to winners sometimes more than $2,000. Now, I said the 1930s, and what happened in the 1930s? The Depression. Many people were out of work. Many people were ruined. So if you could actually do dancing and possibly win $2,000, I'd do 2,000 hours of dancing. Now, $2,000 at that time is today the equivalent of about, I'd say, $19,000. That was a huge sum of money. So in that instance, people were now coming not just to enjoy the beach, but to dance for money. Well, of course, if you're there, you want everybody in your family and friends to know that you're at Revere Beach. So postcards were being printed, and it says, "Greetings from Revere Beach." And we see a woman in a diaphanous gown, and she's a butterfly. And what you see is the bathing scene on both sides, the Revere Beach Reservation, and the bandstand. So you could write home, "Wish you were here," and make sure that everyone knew you were on vacation. But they also had these wonderful little postcards, and again, this is the pavilion. It shows a girl standing on the wooden aspect of the, a fence on the side, holding onto a light pole. If I ever had a daughter, that would be mine, and I'd break her legs because, of course, she could fall into the ocean. These postcards were a fun thing to do, but it was also the fact that some of these postcards emulated things in Europe. Now, on the upper left-hand side, a morning smile at Revere Beach. Beautiful girls sitting on the wooden dock pilings. But on the right-hand side is a bronze statue of Hans Christian Andersen's The Little Mermaid. So in a lot of ways, these are things that echo the things that we knew in Europe. Now, during that period, a lot of times you had to realize Revere Beach has always offered great swimming, sunbathing, fishing, and boating. And today, the beach is home to sandcastle competitions, kite festivals, fireworks, outdoor movies, music, and so much more. But on the upper right and upper left, you began to see the people renting their suits. Now, most of the suits were black. They had a little sailor's collar on the back. You could put it up so your neck wouldn't burn. But these two ladies on the right-hand side actually have form-fitting outfits that were not regulation. And you began to see in some ways that these girls would go on in some ways to really make Revere Beach an attraction, as we'll see. Bathers tired of sand and surf could visit the amusements along the boardwalk. At Wonderland, America's first self-contained amusement park, and the model for Disney World, this is the Greyhound Racing Wonderland, they could ride early roller coasters such as the Virginia Reel, Wild Mouse, or if they were brave, the Cyclone, the largest roller coaster in New England. Dance halls were another attraction, especially during the Depression when dance marathons were regular fare at the Ocean View and Wonderland ballrooms. So here, with the projection on the upper left-hand side of that pier all the way out, not only was that place for dancing, but it was also cool. You had the aspect of all four sides of the dance hall having sea breezes. So this was a major part of people's entertainment, and it only cost a nickel to get to Revere Beach. Now, Wonderland, as I mentioned earlier, really was quite the place. The Wonderland amusement park operated from 1906 to 1910, 4 years, in Revere, featuring various roller coasters, rides, and exhibits. But the park continued to decline, possibly because so much of the park had to be shuttered during the winter, but also because it was not directly on Revere Beach and was losing business to attractions along the boulevard. Wonderland closed at the end of the 1910 season, but this postcard shows all the different amusements. Now, you could spend the entire day there, and many people did, but the whole aspect is you had things such as this, the entrance to Wonderland. Now, it's a beautiful building, flags flying, but Wonderland was built on 25 acres of land known today as the Wonderland Dog Track. It's going to be redeveloped today into housing. And because of the success of Revere Beach Boulevard, 3 men worked together to create Wonderland. John Higgins, a commercial real estate broker, and Floyd Thompson, a visionary with interest in amusement parks, combined their talents to create Wonderland. Now, on the lower right-hand side, you had one admission, and this was for any day prior to August 15th, except Sundays and holidays. It was actually for 10 cents. And when it got you into there, you could then pay for each individual ride that you wanted to go on. Well, some of them were shooting the chutes. Now, this was something that if you didn't want to get wet, you shouldn't take, because the chute splashed into the water and drowned everyone. People came to enjoy what was called the Coney Island of the East, Revere Beach. The boulevard boasted rides, dance halls, movie theaters, carousels, roller coasters, and all kinds of special attractions. There was Bluebeard's Palace, Nautical Gardens, the Pit, and the Himalaya, with just a few. Shoot the Chutes ride was a light skiff drawn up on a long ramp to a tower at the top and then released with lubricating base of water. The boat would achieve such high speed sliding down the ramp that it would skip across the surface of the lagoon like a stone. I again would not allow my children to go on Shoot the Chute. But in that way, you began to see that the children and adults were mesmerized. This was called the Orient. And of course, if you look, there are minarets, they're multicolored, and they even have, as you see at the very top, the Turkish top, the finial to the minarets. This was something that had things that were Turkish, and you would see inside mannequins that moved, as well as, of course, walking through these Turkish gardens. It was unusual. Probably most 95% of the people in Boston had never even heard of Turkey, let alone visited it. But these were things that were bringing worldwide attractions for people to visit. One was the Japanese garden. Now, Japan had become somewhat important in the latter part of the 19th century, not only with export, but also because of the Japanese influence on furniture and fabrics. Now, seen here, they not only had this wonderful entrance gate, but they had all of the buildings within this area designed to look like Japanese buildings and temples. But notice on the left-hand side, a hill, and that was actually a hill that would erupt on cue. But one of the things you wanted to do was have your photograph taken on the Royal Arch in the Japanese village. And of course, it went over a small body of water. It was a little creek, and you can see people waiting to just cross over it. I guess it was the thing. What did you do? Oh, I crossed the Japanese Arch. So the whole thing was, these were things on a Sunday afternoon that people who worked all week wanted to see. But the boardwalk at Wonderland, as you can see here, had people constantly, from early in the morning until late at night. It was illuminated for electricity, so many people could stroll the boardwalk as well as the ocean itself. But in the distance, as I mentioned, was this, the souvenir Revere Beach Carnival of 1906. Well, they decided in the Japanese village to create a volcano. And the volcano was 40 feet in height. And within the volcano was something that when they pressed a button would not only come up and dump mud, not lava, but it would also see that there would be things shot into the air. So it was like the volcano was erupting as you watched it. It was really quite fun, I'm sure, but it's something that was really quite unusual. You're going to the beach and you see a volcano. So people began to see in some ways that many of these buildings were an attraction. And the nautical garden seen here at Revere Beach faced onto the ocean. Now look at the building. You've got an entrance. This looks just like Union Station, which is now North Station at Causeway Street. Two wonderful towers on either side, flags, a cupola. But this was a place that not only had a restaurant, ice cream stands, but dancing at night. But you see in the foreground, people bathing in the ocean. So the whole aspect was to attract you there and offer you a variety of different entertainments. And in some ways, seen here, that people would come and they would walk along the boulevard, but do you notice little arches? Just like the Italian feasts, these had electric lights that would illuminate the entire boulevard for over 2 miles. So it was something that people realized. It was safe, but it was also fun, and it only cost a nickel. But some of these places, too, had actually things such as the casino dance hall. Now, it didn't just allow you to dance. It also had a casino. So you could lose whatever little money you had that you brought to Revere Beach. And of course, as you see on the right-hand side, this was actually a simple carousel. Now, along this area, basically from the railroad station to 2 miles, there were a variety of different things. Some were really quite fun. This was the Derby Racer. And when you went inside, you would be given a Derby Racer. And you would sit there, maybe with a friend, 2 people, and you would go up and down on this wonderful aspect of what was the roller coaster. But the Derby would go one way and other ways. It never went upside down. But the whole aspect was they were attached to the track. And notice the entrance? The devil. Well, the devil made those children do it. And in that instance, the Derby Racer was something that usually young boys loved. But they also had here, as you can see here, the Derby Racer on the left-hand side, and you can see part of the track on the far left and on the upper right. But then you could actually have a fish dinner. Now, Trask's, which is seen here in the center, it had its dining room, dated back to the 1860s. And when they advertised, they actually offered fish dinners and other jollifications. I don't know what the other jollifications were, but you could get fish. Now, today we might think fried clams, maybe fish and chips, but fried clams started with the Parker House in Boston in the 1860s. So maybe Trask's was actually doing that. Whatever they did, it was fresh. It was right from the ocean. And it was something you could get something quick to eat. Now, during that period, the merry-go-round was something that everyone loved. And it was called the Hippodrome, where it was located. It was originally built in 1903 and had a platform that displayed 3 carousel horses abreast. It was later extended to showcase 5 abreast, making it one of a kind. The organ music of the two Givoli organs can be seen and heard with the memory of the majestic carousel which operated until May of 1973. Wonderland Park, Revere Beach, Mystic City by the Sea, was America's foremost self-contained amusement park. And conceived in 1905, it opened in 1906, and some people believe it to be the inspiration behind the Disney-themed parks of today. On the left, you can almost imagine the music and the carousel horses going up and down. Fantastic if you haven't had a couple of drinks. But that was something that children loved, but many adults took as well. Now, I was speaking earlier. They also had popcorn, as you can see on the right-hand side. Everybody loves popcorn. But it was adjacent to a building called Infant Incubators with Living Infants. Now, why wouldn't you want to go there if you're at Revere Beach? In the 1880s and 1890s, you saw the floating hospital of Boston begin to arise. Many of our ancestors lived in tenements, the North End, the South End, the West End. And if they became ill, medicine might help. But it was also the fact that these were usually very tight spaces and very hot. The floating hospital brought the children out onto the ocean on the floating hospital. They would be treated. They might stay for a week, clean clothing, clean sheets, being fed nutritious food and medication, and they would recover. It was also thought that the bracing sea air was good for the lungs. Now here, infant incubators meant that these were children that had difficulty when they were born breathing on their own. This was an exhibit for 5 cents, and you could walk through with your popcorn, looking at the babies behind glass, breathing on incubators. I don't think that's much of what we would want to do at the beach, but it was something that was there until the 1930s. Very unusual. And there was also a clock, seen on the right-hand side, which was once used to remind beachgoers to return their rented bathing suits. It has since become a popular tourist attraction for beachgoers. Now, you rented the bathing suit for 1 hour. If it was over 1 minute, you rented it for 2 hours. Now, a lot of people, of course, would actually change. They had changing booths for 1,000 people. But the whole idea was this was a major attraction. By the 1920s, people were coming on the weekend, and they sat on the beach. They have little cabanas. They don't have many umbrellas. But the whole aspect is, not only do you have the lifeguards on the upper left-hand side, which became an enormous help because many people were drowning. Many people didn't swim. But you also had this wonderful beachgoer with her parasol. So the whole concept here was they even had girls that would do dances on the beach, and this is the peekaboo dance. These girls are, I guess, Boston or Revere Beach's aspect to the Rockettes in New York. But they actually show a little bit of gam, and they wear a top which actually covers part of their thighs, and it was a regulation. Women could not show anything below their kneecaps. This was something that you realized was a major part of actually covering the body. But bathing suits evolved, and we see here in 1927 a very beautiful woman. She has a striped top and, I guess, hot pants. 1925, she's a little bit more covered. 1900, oh my God, she's got it from head to toe. 1890, she looks like a prison mall. And in 1875, the Puritans have come to Revere Beach. So you began to see, in some ways, the evolution, not just of a bathing suit, but if you think about it, women's fashion. I mean, women in 1875 were wearing bustles and hoop skirts, and in 1927 they were wearing, the flapper gowns. So people saw in some ways that this was something that was fun. Many people, they had a job, they didn't probably make very much, and during the Depression they wanted to do something that might be free. Well, come to the boulevard by moonlight, and it showed, of course, Dragon Gorge on the left-hand side. Now, Dragon Gorge was something that actually had all sorts of different things as you walk through it. there were dragons, there were dinosaurs and different things, and they moved and they roared. But this was something that had searchlights. Now, when I was a child, seeing a searchlight was really exciting. And you would think in some ways, what's going on? It must be a movie premiere. When I was a child, we used to summer at Green Harbor, so nothing happened. But the whole idea was every so often you'd see these searchlights. Well, look at the boulevard. Those enormous metal rods are completely covered with electric light bulbs. So not only with the searchlights, but the electric light bulbs and the illuminated buildings, this was fun. And seen here, Pier Dancing Pavilion by moonlight. And again, like I mentioned, they had dance competitions. Now on the right-hand side, it's a dance couple of the 1920s. This was something that was really a lot of fun. But if you're only dancing 45 minutes out of every hour, you at least got 15-minute breaks. And probably by the third or the fourth day, they were holding each other up. Now, another thing was the roller coaster. It's not always been my favorite, but the whole concept is the roller coaster was a major part of any amusement park. People would take a car, go up and down, and then even 45-degree angles. Here, this is a painting by a man named Prendergast. Prendergast was a fantastic painter at the turn of the century, and it shows young adults, children, and adults in the foreground, along with all of the aspects of the cyclone. There was also Descent into the Hell Gate. Now, the Hell Gate actually had a real devil. Now, heaven forbid the poor woman was a Roman Catholic, 16 years old. Should I go into the Hell Gate? Well, the ride took passengers on a boat through a spiral track towards the center point where it dropped suddenly down to a lower level. The lower level was decorated as a cave populated by demons and mythological creatures. The riders disembarked and were brought to the throne of Satan himself before emerging back into the sunlight. I'm sure this probably spooked a lot of different people, but it was a very popular place to visit. And there was also here, you see frozen custard on the left-hand side and the castle. And the castle actually had that man's hand that moved as you came into the castle. This again was something that had all sorts of different rides for the people. So not only could you get custard and fish dinner or even basically clams, you could actually go through all of these different places. And by the late 1930s, it was a destination. Many people did come by the railroad, but now they were coming by automobile. And you can see that they had no rhyme nor reason for parking, because some of them are actually on the sand. Now, I don't know if they got out. I can remember many people actually parking cars on muddy lawns and not getting out. But this was something in some ways that brought thousands of people, especially on the weekend. So the attraction was real. It was inexpensive. You didn't really have to buy anything if you had gone for bathing. By this point, many people had their bathing suits. And here, in 1942, is a great photograph. Probably one of your family members is in that crowd. Not only were there thousands of people, but they were of all different ages. And look on the upper left-hand side, all of the different amusements. I love this. Not only did they have lifeguards, but on the upper left-hand side, they had rowboats that actually, if you went too far into the ocean, the lifeguards would actually row out to you, hopefully before you died. For more than a century, beginning each year from Easter time until Labor Day, visitors from all over the world were entertained at Revere Beach. In the early years, they walked, bicycled, or took horse-drawn carriages. Later on, it was convenient to reach via the narrow gauge, automobile, and thousands would come by ferry. Revere Beach was the place to go to be entertained, have fun, or just to relax and enjoy a day at the beach. And notice on the left-hand side, this is a photograph from 1955. They have finally created a real parking lot. Now, seen here, the Lightning was built by Henry Davis and Henry Travers. Do you remember the people we spoke of earlier? They were accomplished roller coaster designers. The all-steel coaster was the most terrifying of its time, anywhere in the country. The only straight and level track along the ride was at the station when you got on or hopefully got off. Its steep grades and banked curves made it the most unique coaster in the world. Now, this was something that was 75 feet in height. So you can imagine coming down and curving. It's like I-95. But the idea is that people, I'm sure, lost their lunch. But many people looked at this as one of the most enticing and wonderful rides imaginable. Now, seen here, roller coasters thrilled many beachgoers during all the years of Revere Beach's prominence as New England's playground. They had the Tickler, the Thunderbolt, Derby Racer, and the Jack Rabbit were just four. Dragon Gorge and the Thompson Scenic Railway were also early favorites, and two of the most famous on Revere Beach were the Lightning roller coaster and the Cyclone that you see here. Now, I love how the streetcar and traffic is on the back road of Revere Beach. You go by there as you see people going up and down the roller coaster. But these were things that you could ride for 10 cents. And they were really enthralling. And again, here in a photograph of the 1960s, this was some place that some people spent the entire day, and that was before sun cancer. But the idea here was you see the Cyclone on the left-hand side, the Virginia Reel in the distance, and all the way up to Point of Pines, which was where the mansions were located. Revere Beach had wonderful housing towards that area. Now, the boulevard and bathhouse, and this is an early postcard, was important because the bathhouse, I mentioned the Turkish baths, but they also allowed changing rooms, was an important feature. It was your base. So many people might sit under the shelters or they actually might go to the beach. But by the 1960s and 1970s, when I was going, they called the boulevard the Great White Way at Revere Beach. And it says, where can you win a house and lot for a dime? Now, during that period, they would have these competitions. It was a lottery. And for a dime, you would actually buy a lottery ticket. And that lottery ticket would actually be for a small lot of land and a house. Now, these houses are cheek by jowl. I mean, you could probably see the people eating their dinner in the next window. But the concept was, for a dime, why not take a chance? And it actually worked. The surrounding area was marshland, and much of it would be infilled, and they would actually create buildable lots of land. And Revere Beach during that period of time had so many people that it was a great undertaking, and it made a fortune. Well, during that period, some of the dance halls in the 1960s were really quite fun. Does anybody remember the Parkway? Well, the Parkway offered lobster dinners for $1.75. But they also had the Driftwood, Barney Chef's, the General Edwards Inn, where we used to go for dinner, the Skipper, and the Paul Rogers House. All featured the finest in seafood. Fast food outlets included Joe and Nemo's, Howard Johnson's, Rudolph's Pepper Steak, Danny's, and of course the world-famous Kelly's Roast Beef, where if you like rare, uncooked meat, you are welcome. Kelly's Roast Beef sandwiches were famous the world over. I hate to say it, it probably looked delicious, and I said I would love to have it after you cook it. But here they offered not just pizza, clam strips, as well as fried chicken, but their roast beef was one of the biggest things. And children would go there, and they realized in some ways it was street food. It was something that was quick, it was delicious, but you would never have it at home. And of course, Rudolph's Peck of Steaks was not only so well known that we even had an artist paint it. Now, this was something that you see. They serve clams, shrimp, onion rings, and French fries. It sounds delicious, but after a few bites and everything, you begin to realize anything fried in oil is a little bit heavy on the stomach. So then you should have frozen custard. So the whole idea is, with ice cream, fried clams, hot roast beef, all beef hamburgers, this was something that children usually came home with distressed stomachs. But in the 1960s, they had other things, such as the arcade bazaar. Now, you go in there, and they would have little tables that you could actually use a gun to shoot at the little thing. You had pinball machines. You had all sorts of things in the arcade. Usually attracted teenage boys, so it was something that everyone stopped talking the minute you walked in. But the whole idea was, along this, I do see Rudolph's pepper steak in the distance, the Frolic was one of the biggest attractions. Many might remember the Frolic nightclub where some of the country's most famous singers and comedians performed. Barbra Streisand, Jimmy Durante, Paul Anka, and Jerry Vale. Everyone's moaning. I mean, you're telling your age. Come on now. This was where many got their start here. Now, look at the photographs. They're all very young. But if you're going to the Frolic, it said dine and dance. And it was fun. You'd probably have a lovely meal, and you would dance. It was also air-conditioned. So that was something that made the Frolic into a big attraction. And here, in the 1970s, it had descended into a bit of honky-tonk. The beach was never really kept as clean as it should be. The different amusements seemed in some ways gauged so that you would never win anything. But the also thing was the different places and restaurants were not as attractive. And here, on the left-hand side, maybe you remember, 3 balls for $1 and you threw them. And if you actually knocked 3 things over, you got a stuffed animal. Something that you were happy to get. A week later, you'd wondered why you did it. But the whole concept was, this shows that you could have won a little monkey with a top hat. Now, I think that would be adorable on your living room sofa. The man even looks a little bit perplexed. It says 3 balls for $1, 1 ball for 50 cents. Well, it's 3 balls. Why not? You're saving 50 cents. And look at them. They're all around. They must be related to one another. Well, the Cyclone roller coaster was the world's most famous. It was built in 1925 at a cost of $125,000. Today, that would be the equivalent of $8 million for a roller coaster. This all-wood coaster was built by Harry Travers. Its first vertical drop was 100 feet, and riders experienced the thrill of the ride at speeds of 45 to 50 miles an hour. It was also the world's fastest and largest coaster, measuring 3,600 feet of track. Now, the Cyclone coaster, good for one ride, 40 cents. Oh, my God. But the whole aspect was, people did it. It was a great story. You could tell it at your next dinner party. And here a photograph in color, showing the people, the roller coaster, the Virginia reel. All of these things was something that made an afternoon fun. Mind you, this was only 1/4 the size of Coney Island in New York, but it was fun and people loved it. I like this. These were Dodge cars, and it's actually just like driving in London. Dodge cars go around and you hit everybody and you actually just continue to ride on. But in the distance, you had the carousel. People could watch everything you see you doing. So these were games that were fun. I love this photograph. It shows a man with his son on his shoulders right in the middle of the carousel. But look at the different colors. It must have been very attractive when it actually went around. And when you got down, you could have kettle corn. Why not? Well, the amusement park closed in 1978. Revere Beach was the Coney Island of Massachusetts, the playground of New England. But what they decided to do at that point was to change the character. It was, as I mentioned, honky-tonk, many people realized. And seen here, especially on early Sunday mornings, people came to watch the ocean or take a stroll along the boulevard. This was a time when people realized in some ways that by noontime, right through to midnight, this was a place that had thousands of teenage and early 20-year-old children. Now, during that period, they tried to make Revere Beach into something that was more of an attraction. They cleaned it every day. They dredged it. And they would have people coming, as you see here, in bathing suits, not the regulation ones of 1870. But I love this. They must be 2 Italian brothers. Not only do they, I hope those are rolled up pants and they didn't wear them like that. White shirts, they have their bags under their arm, and hats. So it didn't matter who you were, the beach and the ocean water felt good. And here in a photograph of the 1990s, this was now a place that people were coming, not just to bathe, but to picnic. We didn't go often, but whenever we went, we had Kentucky Fried Chicken. Don't ask me why, but in the mid-1960s, I guess it was the thing to do. It was a great afternoon, but it was also something in some ways. A great uncle lived just across the street in Point Pine, so we could all shower the sand off our bodies. And here, by 2000, people were coming on a regular basis. And it was a little bit more polite. You saw people of all ages, and it was again something that people saw changing. Now, the changes meant that there were different things to do. You might have kite festivals. You had bocce on the beach. And you also basically had the sand sculptures. Now, on Cape Cod in Yarmouth, they do a sand sculpture every place you can imagine. I always wonder, how do they keep them together? Hairspray or something like that? But here at Revere Beach, they decided in about 1999 to start it in such a way that it would attract people. It's like first night when they did ice sculptures at Copley Square. Well, the Revere Beach International Sand Sculpting Festival was now one of the wonders of the world. And here you would see in 2015, this festival was for the spirit of Massachusetts. Now, what is the dome on the left-hand side? No? State House, very good. What's the second one? Zakim Bridge. The third one? Very good, Old North Church. And then you have a generic lighthouse. But that's all made out of sand. Now, the whole aspect was you'd have thousands of people doing different designs. This actually had 50 people, I was told, actually doing this one thing. This was taller than a man. So in this instance, you had people going in a way and with a base that they would build upon. So this is the opposite side. They finished the State House. Look at that. It looks just like the State House. And the Zakim Bridge, my friend Miguel Rosales designed it. The Old North Church and the wonderful lighthouse. So this was something you would come and see. It attracted a whole new ilk of people. And it was a major part because some things had no rhyme nor reason. These two children are sitting on a sandbank in the foreground, and out of their hand arises a genie. So I don't know if it's that song Genie from the 1990s, but you see here something that's actually 12 feet high. These were things, great attraction, interesting, but even this one, a lion's face with a architectural background with a hand. I'm not quite sure what it means. Maybe it's mystic or something of that sort. But the whole idea was it was a great attraction. And here, this wonderful eagle with a woman arising from the ocean. So it was really a creative aspect. So whether it was kite flying or bocce or even baseball or lawn tennis, you saw people coming. And in a lot of ways, by this period in the late 1990s, much of the boulevard would be demolished to make way for luxury condominiums. What would we do without condominiums? Well, some were senior, some were truly luxury, others were affordable housing. But can you imagine the view from your apartment looking over the ocean? And you began to see in some ways it took on a whole new meaning. Revere Beach may have been the oldest bathing beach in America, but by this period it had such a rich history of over a century that in July of 1996, Revere Beach celebrated its 100th anniversary as the first public beach in the United States. The history goes to show, yes, it did start off as a reservation. It was protected land because, of course, they could build directly on the ocean and lose some of the coastline to private houses. But what they did was to keep it open for the public, accessible by the railroad and later the Blue Line of the MBTA. But by the 20th century, you saw it changing into the 21st century into something that now had permanent residents. And yes, people that still came to the beach, but it was a whole new aspect. So Revere Beach Wonderland is a little bit of everything and something for everyone. I hope you enjoyed it. Questions? Yes.
How close to Encore is Revere Beach?
Well, Encore is just over the Charlestown Bridge in Everett. So you're talking about 5-6 miles. You couldn't walk it, or I couldn't walk it, maybe you could, but it's about 5 or 6 miles.
Yeah.
Yes, and back.
When I was like maybe 3 years old, we lived a couple blocks from there,
Yeah.
and we used to go down and dig steamers for supper. So we couldn't afford much, so we had pot on the cob and steamers for supper.
It's a great dinner. But that's funny you say that because I have a summer house in Alsterville, and I had a King Charles Spaniel. So they actually have this thing called bars. So you can actually have a license and go and dredge clams and quahogs. I bought everything. I bought the claw, I did everything. The dog got more quahogs than I did. But I guess they had little bubbles so where they breathe. But the whole idea is you had maybe not a lot, but you have a memory. And that's fun. When you look at these things, yeah, we've all had hard times, but you think about it, it's fun. And I think that's an important part. Yes?
Could you go there and have a good time with $3, like could the average person afford it?
I would think so. I mean, you might have something a little bit lighter, maybe a hot dog, maybe an ice cream cone, but the beach was free.
And you mean the average person could go and have a good time?
Many of us did, yes. Yes.
Are you familiar with the movie Spencer
For hire?
for Hire and how a lot of it was filmed
Yes.
in Wonderland?
Well, Spencer for Hire was one of those major TV shows. I'm not a TV aficionado, but Robert Ulrich, who was the star of that, did actually do a lot in Boston. And Revere Beach is also something in some ways. You know, we have a tourist committee, but we also have a movie bureau committee for the state. And they try to actually encourage movies or documentaries to be done in Boston. And it's a great way to increase our revenue. That's why our taxes are so low. I'm glad you're listening. God.
And that movie, the whole movie was actually filmed all in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Some of it was even done by Medfield State.
My office was on D Street in South Boston for 40 years. It was an area that you would never want to be caught dead in. I loved it. But they would actually do things that, you know, I can't remember the one movie they did, but it was about an Irish mafia member, Matt Damon, I think. And they were actually going into the places where I used to go to buy lunch. And I said, wow, this place is incredible. Well, anyway, I do have a few books. My latest book is The Christmas Tree Shop, but I have Jordan Marsh, Howard Johnson's, and Baker's Chocolate. They're all $20. But thank you so much for coming.